phantom ache. The silence, the nothing, the absence that somehow takes up more space than presence ever did. You check your phone, again. The screen lights up, empty. You scroll through names that haven't spoken your name. You wonder. You wait. You feel the phantom ache of being forgotten. Not forgotten like a missed appointment, forgotten like a species going extinct, quietly, without ceremony, without anyone noticing the exact moment you disappeared. Let's sit here, in this specific herd, because it is specific, isn't it? This isn't loneliness. Loneliness is the awareness of being alone. This is different. This is the sensation that you have become optional, that the world's algorithm has deprioritized you, that you are no longer in the rotation of anyone's thoughts. Why does this hurt so much? The silence of others, their lack of reaching out, their failure to remember you exist. Why does it feel like a verdict, like a judgment rendered by a jury of everyone you've ever known, and the verdict is unworthy of consideration? Let's ask it again. Why? Because we are pattern recognition machines wrapped in skin. We are creatures who learned survival through belonging, through the tribe, through being remembered. To be forgotten by the group was death, actual death, exile, alone with the predators and the cold. So we carry this ancient wiring, this code written in the DNA of our great-great-great-grandmother, who knew that if the clan stopped calling her name, she would not survive the winter. You feel it, that old terror, dressed up in modern clothes, wearing the costume of text messages and social invitations. But underneath it's the same primal panic, the same question our ancestors asked around fires that have long since gone cold. Do I still matter? Have I been erased? But let's go deeper. Let's ask it again. Why does silence feel like verdict? Because you have made a category error. You have confused attention with worth. You have believed the lie that your value is calculated by the frequency of other people's thoughts about you, as if you are a stock, as if your worth fluctuates with the market of social contact, as if the silence means something true about you, rather than something true about the chaos of other people's lives, their overwhelm, their distraction, their own phantom aches. But that doesn't help, does it? Knowing this intellectually, because the ache doesn't live in your intellect. It lives in your body, in your chest, in that hollow space where connection used to be, or where you imagined it was. The phenomenology of this, the actual experience. What does it feel like? The weight of being unthought of. Describe it. Not the psychology, not the explanation, the sensation itself. It feels like fading, like becoming transparent, like you are a photograph left in sunlight, the colors leaching out, the edges blurring. You are still there, but less vivid, less solid, less real. You watch other people's lives continue, through screens, through the glow of curated moments. You see them gathering, laughing, remembering each other, and you are not there, not in the photo, not in the joke, not in the memory being made. You have become a ghost, haunting your own life, watching from outside the window, the warmth and light inside, the cold and dark outside. And here is the recursive trap, the loop that tightens. You feel forgotten, so you withdraw, because reaching out feels desperate, feels like begging, feels like confirmation that you were right, that you are too much or not enough, that your presence is a burden, an obligation, a chore on someone else's list. So you don't reach out, you wait, you test, you create little experiments. If I don't text first, will they? If I don't initiate, will anyone notice? And the silence becomes data, evidence, proof of your theory, that you are always optional, always secondary, always someone's backup plan. But let's ask it one more time. Why does the silence of others feel like a verdict on our worth? Because you are alone with your thoughts, and your thoughts are not kind. Your thoughts are prosecuting attorneys, building a case against you, using the silence as Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. The prosecution rests. You are guilty of being forgettable, of being insufficient, of not mattering enough to remember. But here's the thing about verdicts. They require a judge, and you have appointed the silence itself as judge. You have given it authority. You have allowed absence to become evidence. You have let the void speak, and the void always says the same thing, nothing, which you have translated to mean you are nothing. But what if the silence is just silence? What if the absence is just absence, not a message, not a meaning, not a mirror of your value, just the empty space between moments, the pause between breaths, the gap that exists, not because you are unworthy, but because life is gap and noise, gap and noise, gap and noise, forever, for everyone. But you don't feel that, do you? You feel the ache, the phantom ache, phantom, like the limb that was amputated, the pain signals firing for a body part that no longer exists, or perhaps never existed the way you thought it did. You ache for connection that was always more fragile than you knew, for friendships that were always circumstantial, for attention that was always temporary. Everything is temporary. The attention, the forgetting, the remembering, the silence, the noise, you, temporary, all of it. But knowing this doesn't stop the ache, so let's stop trying to stop it. Let's stop trying to rationalize it away, or think it away, or scroll it away. Let's just feel it, the phantom ache of being forgotten. Let it be there, in your chest, in your throat, in the hollow space behind your eyes. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it be true, because it is true. The feeling is true, even if the interpretation is false. You do feel forgotten. That is real. That is valid. That is your lived experience, your phenomenology. And there is something almost, peaceful about admitting it, about saying it out loud, even if only to yourself. I feel forgotten. I feel like I have disappeared from the consciousness of people I thought would remember me. I feel like an afterthought, like a name they can't quite recall, like a face they scroll past without recognition. There, you said it, the terrible true thing, and you didn't die. The world didn't end. The feeling didn't destroy you. It just is, existing alongside you, the phantom ache. And maybe the relief is not in being remembered. Maybe the relief is in admitting that you want to be remembered, that you hunger for it, for someone to think your name, to wonder about you, to reach across the void and say, I thought of you. You exist in my mind. You matter. That hunger is not shameful. It is human. It is the same hunger every human has felt, sitting by their version of a phone, waiting for their version of a message, feeling their version of the phantom ache. You are not alone in feeling alone. You are not forgotten in feeling forgotten. You are part of an ancient tradition of humans aching for connection, of humans measuring their worth by the attention of others, of humans getting it wrong and feeling the pain of getting it wrong and surviving it anyway. The ache will pass, not because someone remembers you, but because aches always pass, phantom or otherwise. They flare, they fade, they return, they fade again. This is not the last time you will feel forgotten. This is not the last time you will check your phone and find nothing. This is not the last time you will wonder if you have become optional, invisible, erased. But it is also not the last time you will feel remembered, not the last time someone will reach out, not the last time you will matter to someone, and when that someone is you, if that someone is ever you, the question remains open. The ache doesn't ask for answers, because here is the bedrock, the bottom of the recursive why. The silence of others feels like a verdict on our worth, because we have outsourced the verdict. We have given the gavel to everyone else. We have waited for them to decide. Am I worthy? Am I enough? Do I matter? And they cannot answer, because they are not judges. They are just people, distracted people, overwhelmed people, people with their own phantom aches, their own silence, their own waiting. You are the only judge. You are the only one who can render the verdict. And the verdict is, you exist. You are here. You feel. You ache. You hunger. You hope. That is enough. That has always been enough. The phantom ache will tell you otherwise. Let it ache. Let it lie. Let it fade. And when it returns, because it will return, let it again. You don't need to be remembered by others to be real. You are already real, already here, already worthy of your own attention, your own reaching out, your own remembering. The silence of others is just silence, not verdict, not truth, not measure, just silence. You are sound. The silence is sound. Both, neither. The phantom ache doesn't resolve into meaning. It just is. The architecture of expectation. The architecture of expectation. Before we built buildings, we built agreements, invisible, unspoken, more binding than any contract you'd ever sign with ink. These are the blueprints of connection, the scaffolding of belonging, and maybe, just maybe, you're standing in the ruins of one right now. Let's talk about the contracts nobody told you that you signed. The ones written in breath and proximity and the currency of showing up. Let's talk about what happens when someone stops honoring terms you didn't even know you'd agreed to. The confusion, the particular flavor of confusion that comes when the rules change mid-game and nobody announced it. When someone you thought was building the same structure suddenly reveals they were working from completely different plans, you feel crazy, don't you? Because how do you argue about something that was never spoken? How do you point to the exact moment of breach when the agreement itself was made of glances and patterns and the rhythm of response? You can't, so you stand there, in the debris, wondering if you imagined the whole architecture. Here's the thing about social contracts, the real ones, not the philosophy textbook kind. They're built from repetition. Someone texts you, you text back. Someone shares a burden, you hold space. Someone laughs at your joke, you feel seen. Do this enough times, and something hardens into expectation, into structure, into I can count on this. The brain loves patterns, craves them, needs them to navigate the chaos of human interaction. So it takes these repetitions and builds predictions. It constructs a map of reliability, and you start to move through your relationships like you move through your home in the dark. Confident, because you know where the furniture is. Until someone moves the furniture and doesn't tell you. Until you reach for support that isn't there anymore. Until you walk confidently into what should be open space and slam into a wall instead. The bruise is real, even if nobody else can see it. Even if the person who moved the furniture thinks you're overreacting. Why does it hurt so much? Because you weren't just expecting a text back or an invitation or their presence at the thing. You were expecting the pattern to continue, the contract to hold. Why does the pattern matter? Because patterns are how we know we're not alone in the void. because consistency is the language of care when words fail us. Why does care need a language? Because without it, we're just bodies passing in space, unanchored, untethered, unsure if we matter at all. And there it is, the bedrock, the foundational terror beneath every broken social contract. Maybe I don't matter. Maybe I never did. Maybe the structure I thought was mutual was just me, alone, building castles in my head while they were barely noticing I was there. Let's sit with that, the permission to feel the full weight of that fear. You're not crazy for building expectations from patterns. That's not weakness. That's not neediness. That's the fundamental human attempt to create predictability in an unpredictable world. That's you trying to know where you stand. And when someone changes the pattern without warning, without acknowledgement, without even seeming to notice that something has shifted, you're not wrong for feeling destabilized. You're not wrong for feeling betrayed by terms that were never technically set. Here's what nobody tells you about unspoken agreements. Both parties can be sincere, and the contract can still collapse. They can genuinely have meant it when they showed up consistently for 6 months. They can genuinely feel different now. They don't have to be villains for you to feel abandoned. They don't have to have lied for you to feel deceived. The hurt is real, even when there's no one to blame. The loss is valid, even when nothing was ever promised out loud. This is the comfortable dark. You built something real from patterns. The fact that it was unspoken doesn't make it imaginary. The fact that they don't acknowledge the shift doesn't mean you're inventing the change. You're allowed to grieve a contract that only existed in behavior. You're allowed to feel the absence of something that was never named. You're allowed to be angry at the violation of terms that were never written down. Because here's the truth about human connection. Most of it lives in that unspoken space. Most of our deepest bonds are built on patterns, not promises, on rhythm, not rules, on the accumulated weight of showing up until someone doesn't. What unspoken contracts did we sign that now feel broken? Maybe it was the friend who always texted first, and now you're the only one reaching out. And the silence when you stop is deafening. Maybe it was the family member who showed up for every crisis, and then they had a crisis, and you showed up, but they're angry about it in a way you don't understand because the terms were never clear. Maybe it was the partner whose presence felt like home, and now they're physically there but emotionally elsewhere. And you can't point to what changed because nothing changed that you can name. Maybe it was the colleague who made work bearable, and now they're cold, and you replay every interaction trying to find where you crossed a line you didn't know existed. Maybe it was you. Maybe you're the one who stopped honoring a pattern, and now you're dealing with someone's hurt and confusion, and you want to say it wasn't a promise. It was just what I did then. I'm different now. And they want to say, but it felt like a promise. Your consistency made me feel safe. Both true, both valid, both irreconcilable in this moment. The architecture crumbles. Here's where it gets recursive. Why do we build these structures at all if they're so fragile? Because the alternative is chaos, complete unpredictability, never knowing if today's warmth will be tomorrow's ice. Why is predictability so important? Because our nervous systems regulate through it. Because we can only be vulnerable when we have some sense of what comes next. Why does vulnerability require prediction? Because to open is to risk. And we only risk when we trust the pattern will hold us. And when the pattern breaks, when the structure you built your vulnerability on reveals itself as temporary, you learn that even good things end without warning. You learn that consistency is not the same as permanency. You learn that people can mean it and still leave, can care and still withdraw, can build something with you and then walk away from it like it was always just scaffolding they never intended to keep. The fatigue, the specific exhaustion of not knowing which connections are solid and which are just temporary arrangements, of wondering if you should stop investing in patterns, stop trusting in repetition, stop building expectations from behavior. Some of you are thinking, maybe I should. Maybe the answer is to expect nothing, to take every interaction as its own isolated moment, to never build prediction from pattern again. And I'll tell you, you can't. Your brain won't let you. Pattern recognition is survival wiring. You can't turn it off without turning off the part of you that connects at all. The real question isn't whether to build expectations. It's how to hold them lightly enough that when they break, you don't shatter with them. How to honor the grief of a collapsed contract without deciding all contracts are lies. How to stay angry at the breach without becoming so defended that no one can reach you again. You don't have to have that figured out yet. You don't have to be resilient or boundaried or healed. Right now, you can just stand in the ruins. You can just acknowledge, I built something here. From patterns and presence and the accumulation of small moments, it felt real because it was real. And now it isn't, and I don't know what I'm standing on anymore. That's enough. That's the work of this moment, not the rebuilding, not the lesson extracted, just the honest accounting of what you lost, the unspoken contract that shaped how you moved through the world, the invisible agreement that made you feel less alone until it didn't, until the other person stopped building, or you did. Or you both did, out of sync in ways neither of you meant as abandonment, but that landed as exactly that. What unspoken contracts did we sign that now feel broken? All of them. None of them. The ones we didn't even know we were making until the terms weren't met. Stay here with that. The architecture of expectation, how we build homes out of patterns, how we inhabit them until we can't. How we stand in the after, surrounded by blueprints for a structure that no longer exists, wondering if we imagined the whole thing. You didn't. It was there. You both built it, from showing up and responding in the small agreements that accumulate into something you could almost call a promise. Almost, but not quite, and that not quite is where you're standing now. In the gap between what felt certain and what was never guaranteed, in the space where social contracts live and die, unspoken, unmourned, except by you. So mourn it, the invisible thing that held you, the pattern that promised continuity, the unspoken agreement that someone would keep building with you. Mourn it like the real loss it is. Even if they don't understand what you've lost, even if you can barely name it yourself. It was the architecture of your expectation, and it collapsed. There is no new architecture coming, just rubble, just the standing, just this. The mirror has no memory. The mirror has no memory. You check your phone 3 times. 4, 17. You know the number. You refresh. Nothing. The silence isn't just silence, it's erasure. You post, you wait, you watch the clock that doesn't exist anymore because time is measured in notifications now, in hearts, in reactions, in proof that you existed for the 3 seconds someone glanced at your carefully constructed evidence of being. The terror, the specific terror of being unseen, not rejected. Unseen. There's a difference. Rejection means someone looked. Unseen means you might be a ghost already and nobody told you. So you check again. The loop, the ancient loop wearing a digital face. If no one reflects us back, do we disappear? Not metaphorically. Actually, does the self require a witness? Is consciousness a call that needs a response, or it dissolves into static? You've felt it. That specific panic when you're alone too long, not lonely, alone, when the voices stop, when no one needs anything from you, when you're not performing your existence for anyone, the you that exists in that moment. Is it real, or is it a rehearsal? A tree falling in a forest that forgot to make a sound because there was no ear to make it matter. You rehearse conversations, in the shower, driving, walking. You say things to people who aren't there, witty things, profound things. You win arguments that never happened. Why? Because those phantom witnesses are holding you in place. The imaginary audience is the scaffolding keeping yourself from collapsing. Without them, what are you? A series of sensations with no narrator. Sartre knew hell is other people, but he also knew the other half, the part we don't quote at parties. Heaven is other people too, because the self is not a solo act. It's a collaboration, a call and response. You throw yourself into the world and wait to see what echo comes back. The echo tells you your shape. Without it, you're formless. You're screaming into a void that doesn't even have the decency to be empty. It's just indifferent, the phone again. The compulsion, the hunger, not for connection, for confirmation. These are not the same thing. Connection is mutual. Confirmation is a mirror. And you've been staring at mirrors so long, you forgot they're just silver and glass. They have no memory. Every time you look away, you vanish from them completely. They don't hold you. They only reflect what's present. And you've been trying to make yourself permanently present by multiplying the mirrors, more platforms, more faces, more chances to be caught in someone's eye and know you're real. But here's the trick. The vicious trick. Each mirror fragments you. You're not one self being reflected. You're 1,000 performances. The you for your mother, the you for your boss, the you for the lover, the you for the strangers who might judge, the you for the algorithm. And somewhere in the kaleidoscope, the original, if there ever was one, got lost. So you're not even sure what you're asking them to reflect anymore. Maybe that's the real terror. Not that they won't see you, but that if they did, really did, there might be nothing there to see. Just a collection of mirrors reflecting other mirrors. Turtles all the way down, but not even turtles. Just the idea of turtles. Echoes of something that might have been solid once. Sartre again. Existence precedes essence. You are not born with a self. You build it. How? Through choice, through action, through the accumulation of moments where you decide. But he missed something. Or maybe he said it and we didn't want to hear it. You build it through the gaze of others. The look. He called it the look. The moment you realize someone sees you. And in that moment, you become an object in their world. You lose your pure subjectivity. You become a thing, a judged thing, and you hate it, the shame, the vulnerability, but you also crave it, desperately, because being an object in someone else's world means you exist in a world beyond your own skull. You're real, objectively real, not just real to yourself. The existential catch, you want to be free, completely free, a pure subject, an eye that's never seen, but that freedom is indistinguishable from non-existence. To be free from the look is to be free from confirmation that you're here at all, so you chase it. The look, you curate, you perform, You check, you wait, you adjust, you try again. The exhaustion of it, the specific exhaustion of holding yourself in existence through borrowed eyes. What if you stopped? This is the question you don't ask because you know the answer terrifies you. What if you didn't check? What if you didn't post? What if you disappeared from the mirrors for a day, a week, a month? Would you still be you? Or would you dissolve like a wave that realizes it was only ever a pattern in water? There's a relief in asking this, a strange relief, because the question itself is proof that some part of you exists independently enough to question whether you exist at all. The Cartesian moment. I think, therefore I am. But Descartes was alone in a room with a heater. He wasn't checking his mentions. Maybe the modern version is different. I refresh, therefore I am. I post, therefore I might be. I am seen, therefore I was. Past tense. Always past tense. Because the moment of being seen is already gone. It doesn't accumulate. It doesn't build into a permanent self. Each reflection is new. Each one requires the previous one to dissolve. You are only ever as real as your last notification. This is the tyranny, the invisible tyranny. You think you're free. You think you're choosing. But you're a puppet on strings made of gazes, invisible strings, pulling you into shapes that get reactions, hearts, shares, comments, each one a little hit, a little proof, a little reprieve from the terror of your own transparency. But here's what nobody says, what we're not supposed to say. The terror is appropriate. It's not a flaw in your psychology. It's not anxiety or insecurity or low self-esteem. It's accurate. You are dependent, radically dependent. The autonomous individual is a fiction, a useful fiction for capitalism maybe, for pretending we're all self-made. But phenomenologically, experientially, you are woven into other people. Your self is distributed, held in place by a network of recognitions and reflections and responses. When those disappear, you don't have a self. You have raw existence, formless, meaningless, free in the way that water is free, which is to say, not free at all, just without shape. The existentialists call this abandonment, dereliction. You are thrown into existence, no instruction manual, no inherent purpose, and everyone else is equally thrown, equally lost. So you reach for each other. Not out of love necessarily, out of mutual terror. We hold each other in place, witnesses at the scene of each other's existence. But we're unreliable witnesses. We see what we want to see, what we're conditioned to see, what serves us to see. So the reflection is always distorted, always partial. You're never fully seen, never fully known. And this is supposed to be liberating, the existentialist promise. You're free to define yourself, to choose, to become. But it feels like the opposite, like you're scrambling in the dark, trying on selves, discarding them, picking up pieces of other people's expectations and wearing them like borrowed clothes that never quite fit. And you're tired. Admit it. You're tired of the performance, tired of the curation, tired of translating yourself into content, into digestible pieces, into mirror-friendly versions. You want to stop. But stopping feels like dying. Maybe that's okay. To sit with that. The fear of stopping being indistinguishable from the fear of dying. Because it means yourself is not a possession. It's a process, a continuous becoming that requires maintenance, requires energy, requires others. And sometimes the maintenance is exhausting. Sometimes you want to let it lapse, to see what happens, to find out if there's anything underneath, anything that doesn't need a mirror. Here's the permission. You don't have to know. You don't have to be sure. You don't have to have a solid, consistent, mirror-proof self. You can be a question mark, You can be a rough draft. You can be a signal searching for reception and sometimes finding only static. And in the static, in the absence of reflection, there is something, not a self, maybe, but an existence, raw, unformed, uncomfortable, but real in its own way, real in the way that a question is real even without an answer. The mirror has no memory. Each time you step away, you disappear from it completely, and each time you return, you have to construct yourself again, from scratch. This is not a bug. It's the condition, the fundamental condition. You are not a thing that is. You are a thing that is always becoming, and becoming requires an audience, not because you're weak, but because that's what being is. It's relational, it's contextual, it's a verb disguised as a noun. So yes, if no one reflects us back, we don't disappear completely, but we become something else, something harder to recognize, harder to hold, something that exists in the gap between the mirrors, in the pause between reflections. And that thing, that gap thing, is terrifying because it has no face, no name, no story. It's just the raw fact of existing without proof. And maybe that's the bedrock, the place where the recursive questions finally stop. You exist, not because you can prove it, not because someone saw you, but because the terror of not existing is itself a form of existence. The question proves the questioner. Your dependence on the mirror doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And the mirror's lack of memory doesn't erase you. It just means you have to show up again and again and again. Each time risking that, you'll look and see nothing. Each time discovering you're still here, still asking, still terrified. You are not permanent, not solid, not here in any way that solves the terror. The mirror still has no memory. You still flicker. The myth of mutual simultaneity. You check your phone. They haven't. You wonder if they're thinking of you right now, this moment, this exact second. The myth, the lie we tell ourselves, that love requires matching clocks, that care must be simultaneous, that if they truly cared, they'd be thinking of you now, right now. Why do we believe that being thought of requires synchronicity? Let's pull that thread. Let's see where it unravels. You imagine them going about their day, making coffee, answering emails, laughing at something you'll never see. And in your chest, a small voice whispers, if they really loved you, they'd be thinking of you right now. Why? Why must thought align with your need for it? Because it would prove something. What would it prove? That you matter, that you exist in their world when you're not in their sight. Why do you need proof? Because without it, you feel temporary, erasable, a person who only exists when witnessed. And there it is, the bedrock, the ancient fear, that you are not permanent in anyone's mind, that you flicker in and out of existence based on proximity, based on whether their attention is currently aimed at you, like a quantum particle observed into being. The myth of mutual simultaneity tells you this, that real love means synchronized thinking, that couples think of each other at the same moments, that best friends reach for their phones at the exact same time, that your mother knows when you're sad, that your partner senses when you need them before you even ask. The romantic notion, the soulmate fantasy, twin flames burning in perfect rhythm. But let me ask you this, when you think of them, are they always thinking of you? Number? Of course not. You know this, yet you demand it anyway. You check the timestamp on their last message, 3 hours ago. You wonder what they've been doing for 3 entire hours, 180 minutes, and in none of those minutes they reached out. Why does this hurt? because time in relationships becomes a currency. Minutes equal care, hours equal priority, days equal love. We've made time transactional, quantifiable. If they loved you, they'd make time. If they cared, they'd reach out. If you mattered, you'd hear from them. More, always more. But love doesn't operate on Greenwich Mean Time. It doesn't punch a clock. It doesn't distribute itself evenly across all hours. You've thought of people you love while washing dishes, while driving, while half asleep, fleeting, warm, brief. Did you text them? No. Does that mean you didn't love them in that moment? Of course not. Yet you deny yourself that same grace. You were in their mind 3 hours ago. They sent a message, proof of thought, evidence of existence. But 3 hours have passed, and you've decided those 3 hours mean something, mean abandonment, mean you've slipped from their priority list, fallen through the cracks of their day. Why do we measure love in response time? Because we're terrified that the people we love continue existing beautifully without us, that they laugh, that they find joy, that they have full, complete moments where we are simply not present. This feels like erasure, like we've been edited out of the film of their life. Entire scenes where we don't appear. How dare they? How dare they exist so completely when we feel so incomplete? The rage beneath the sadness, the betrayal beneath the longing. They are whole without you, and you've built an entire identity around being needed, around being essential, around being the thought that interrupts all other thoughts. But simultaneity is a myth, a physical impossibility. Two people cannot occupy the exact same moment of consciousness. You are always slightly out of sync. Your now is not their now, even in the same room, even holding hands, even mid-sentence. There is a lag, a delay, a space between your experience and theirs. Light takes time to travel, sound takes time to reach, thought takes time to form. You are always, always alone in your exact present moment. This is not romantic. This is physics. This is the nature of existing in a body, in time, in space. You are fundamentally, unavoidably separate, and love happens anyway. Despite the lag, despite the delay, despite the impossible dream of synchronized souls. They think of you. You don't know when. You'll never know when. They could be thinking of you right now. They could have thought of you an hour ago. They could think of you tomorrow morning, while brushing their teeth, while stuck in traffic, while falling asleep. And none of those thoughts send you a notification. None of those moments of care ping your phone. Most love happens in silence, in private, in the unmarked, unshared moments. You have been loved more than you know, thought of more than you can count, held in someone's mind while you had no idea, and it still counted, it still mattered, it was still real, even though you weren't there to witness it, even though it didn't arrive on your timeline, even though it didn't soothe you in your moment of need. The love was real, the thought was real, the care was real. It just wasn't simultaneous with your wanting it. And that's the grief, isn't it? Not that you're unloved, but that love doesn't arrive on demand, that care doesn't sync with your schedule, that someone can love you deeply and still not text you back for 3 hours, for 3 days, for 3 weeks, because their life is happening, messy, complicated, full, and you are one part of it, not the only part, not the central organizing principle. One part. This feels like diminishment, like you've been demoted, but you were never supposed to be the sun. No one can be the sun. It's too much heat, too much responsibility, too much gravity. You are allowed to be a moon, a planet, a star in your own right, orbiting occasionally, distant sometimes, still luminous, still present in the sky, even when not visible, even when daylight hides you. You are there. You have always been there. And they see you, just not always when you want to be seen. The myth of mutual simultaneity promises you this, that love is a constant, unbroken beam of attention, that you can live inside someone else's awareness, that you can set up permanent residence in their thoughts. But the mind doesn't work that way. Attention is a spotlight. It moves, it shifts, it scans the landscape of a life. And yes, it lands on you, warm, bright, real. Then it moves, because it has to, because there are other things that need light, and this doesn't erase you. You are not gone when the spotlight moves. You are simply in the wings, still on stage, still part of the show, waiting for your next cue, your next entrance, your next moment in the light, the relief in this, the permission. You don't have to be thought of constantly to be loved. You don't have to be the obsession, the fixation, the one thought that drowns out all others. That's not love. That's panic. That's fear. That's the desperate clinging of two people trying to merge into one. You are allowed to be separate, to have your own now, your own timeline, your own rhythm, and still be connected, still be cared for, still matter. The thread between you doesn't have to be taut. It can go slack, it can dip, it can rest, and still hold, still exist, still connect you across the distance, across the time, across the impossible gulf of separate consciousness. You are not abandoned when they're not thinking of you. You are simply unobserved, and you exist anyway. You are real anyway. You matter anyway, even in the silence, even in the gap, even in the 3 hours between messages. You are not flickering. You are not temporary. You are not contingent on their attention. You are permanent, solid, here, whether they're thinking of you or not. And when they do think of you, whenever that is, however that arrives, it will be real. It will be true. It will be theirs to give in their own time, not yours to demand on your schedule. This is the truth we don't want, that love is asynchronous, delayed, out of sync, that the people who love you are living whole lives you'll never see, having thoughts you'll never hear, feeling care you'll never witness, and it still counts. All of it counts. Even the love you never know about, especially the love you never know about. The myth shatters here, in this realization that simultaneity was never the point, that matching schedules was never the measure, that love doesn't require synchronized clocks. It requires something else. Trust, maybe. Faith that the care exists even when you can't see it, even when you can't feel it, even when 3 hours have passed and your phone stays silent. The love is still there, just not on your timeline, just not in your now. Is it enough? It's all we get. Whether that's enough is not a question with an answer, just a question you'll keep asking, because it's all we get. In these separate bodies, in these separate moments, in these separate lives that touch occasionally, beautifully, briefly, then drift apart again, still connected, still caring, still real, just not simultaneous, never simultaneous, and somehow, impossibly, that's okay. The burden of being known. The burden of being known, the exhaustion of it, the weight. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when someone looks at you and says they see you, they understand you, they know you, and instead of relief, there's this tightening, this quiet panic, this voice that whispers, but you don't, you can't. No one can. Let's sit with that, not to fix it, not to argue against it, but to ask, what if that's true? What if being truly seen is impossible? And what if that's not abandonment? What if that's just the terms of existence? Stay with me, because here's where it gets interesting. Here's where the recursion begins. Someone says they know you, your partner, your friend, your therapist, your mother. They say, I understand what you're going through. And something in you recoils. Why? Because they don't see the whole picture. Yes, but go deeper. Why don't they see the whole picture? Because you haven't shown them everything. Partially. But keep going. Why haven't you shown them everything? Because it's too much, too dark, too complicated, too contradictory. But why is that a problem? Because if they saw all of it, they'd leave. There it is. The fear beneath the burden, the real weight. It's not that they don't know you. It's that if they really did, they wouldn't stay. That's the terror. That's the exhaustion. You're not tired of being unknown. You're tired of managing what they know, curating it, editing it, performing a version of yourself that's knowable, digestible, acceptable. That's the burden. Not invisibility, but the constant work of remaining partially visible. Let's question that. Let's use the toddler technique, the endless why. You think if they knew the real you, they'd leave. Why? Because the real you is too much. Why is that too much? Because it's messy and contradictory and sometimes cruel. Why is that a problem? Because people can't love what's messy. But why can't they? Because love requires understanding, and understanding requires coherence, and you're not coherent. But why do you need to be coherent to be loved? Because, and here's where it breaks down. Here's where the logic fails, where the recursion hits bedrock. You don't need to be coherent to be loved. You need to be coherent to be known. And those are not the same thing. Write that down. Being known and being loved are not the same thing. In fact, they might be inversely related. The more someone thinks they know you, the less they might actually see you. Because knowing implies completion. Knowledge implies a finished picture, a stable object. And you are not a stable object. You are a process, a verb disguised as a noun. You are not a thing to be known. You are a happening, a continuous becoming, and the moment someone believes they know you, they've stopped seeing you. They're seeing their map of you, their model, their mental construct, not you, never you. Because by the time they've finished their map, you've already moved, you've already shifted, you've already become something slightly different than you were when they started looking. This is epistemology. The study of knowledge, the question of what can be known and how, and when applied to people, to consciousness, to the shifting terrain of a self, the answer is humbling, devastating, and strangely liberating. You cannot be known, not fully, not ever, not by them, not even by yourself. You are too complex, too contradictory, too in motion. You contain multitudes that don't cohere. Desires that cancel each other out, beliefs you don't believe, feelings you can't name. How could anyone map that? How could anyone hold all of that in their mind at once? They can't. They never could. And that's not their failure. That's not your failure. That's just the nature of trying to know another consciousness. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. You can cup some. You can feel its temperature, its weight, but it's always slipping through, always moving, always more than you can contain. So the burden of being known, it's a burden you created by believing it was possible, by believing it was necessary, by believing that love required it. But what if it doesn't? What if the people who love you don't need to know you? What if they just need to witness you? What's the difference? Knowing is about possession. about grasping, about pinning down. Witnessing is about presence, about attention, about allowing. When someone knows you, they have a story about you. When someone witnesses you, they're watching your story unfold without needing to predict it, without needing to understand it, without needing to make it make sense. They're just there, watching, allowing, seeing this version of you today, knowing it might be different tomorrow, not betrayed by that, not confused by that, just present for it. That's different, isn't it? That's lighter. Because witnessing doesn't require you to be consistent, doesn't require you to be explicable, doesn't require you to fit into their framework. It just requires you to be whatever being is for you right now. And maybe that's the relief in the impossibility of being known. Maybe that's the dark comfort. You don't have to be knowable. You don't have to make sense. You don't have to be the same person you were yesterday or the same person you'll be tomorrow. You don't have to cohere. You just have to exist. Messy, contradictory, in process. And the people who love you, they don't love you because they know you. They love you because something in them recognizes something in you, some frequency, some resonance, some inexplicable pull that has nothing to do with understanding. Love is not an intellectual exercise. It's not about comprehension. It's something older, something more animal, something that happens before thought, beneath thought, beyond thought. You've felt this yourself. The people you love most, do you actually know them? Or is there something about them that remains mysterious, unknowable, just out of reach? And isn't that part of what draws you to them? That sense that there's always more, always depths you haven't touched, always new versions of them emerging. If you fully knew them, would they still fascinate you? Or would they become manageable, predictable, finished? Maybe the unknowability is the appeal. Maybe that's what keeps love alive. Not the knowing, but the endless, impossible attempt at knowing, the reaching toward, the trying to touch something that remains always, just slightly beyond your grasp. So the burden of being known, what if you set it down? What if you stopped trying to make yourself understandable, stopped curating, stopped managing, stopped performing coherence? What if you just showed up as you are right now, knowing it's partial, knowing it's incomplete, knowing it's probably different than you were an hour ago? What if you trusted that the people who matter don't need your coherence, they need your presence, your honesty, your willingness to be in process in front of them? That's vulnerable, not because you're revealing everything, but because you're revealing that there is no everything. You're revealing that you don't have it figured out, that you contain contradictions, that you're still becoming. And maybe that's the hardest thing to admit, not that you're broken, but that you're unfinished, still in motion, still figuring it out. Because finished things can be known, finished things can be mapped, but unfinished things, in-process things, they require patience, they require trust, they require the willingness to not know, to stay present anyway. So this is permission, permission to be unknowable, permission to contradict yourself, permission to be different today than you were yesterday, permission to remain always slightly mysterious, even to yourself, especially to yourself. Because if you don't fully know yourself, how could you expect anyone else to? And if you can't map your own interior, why is it a failure when they can't? The burden lifts when you stop believing anyone needs to carry the full weight of who you are. Because no one can. Because you're not a weight to be carried. You're a river, always moving, always changing. And rivers aren't known. They're experienced, they're witnessed, they're moved through. So let them move through you. Let them experience you. This version, this moment, this particular configuration of self, knowing it's temporary, knowing it's incomplete, knowing it's not the whole truth, and being okay with that, being relieved by that. The whole truth is too much, even for you, especially for you. The burden doesn't lift just because you name it. It shifts, it remains. The economy of attention. The economy of attention, that's what they call it now. As if your gaze were currency, as if your presence had a price, as if every moment of connection were a transaction you could profit from or lose at. Why do we measure love in metrics? Because we learn to measure everything else that way. Because scarcity makes things valuable. Because if attention is finite, then withholding it becomes power. But why does power require withholding? Because freely given, things feel worthless in a market. Because we forgot that rivers don't charge for their water. Because we built an economy where hoarding is wisdom and abundance is naive. When did your mother's text become a notification you swipe away? When did checking in become content? When did thinking of you become a caption? You know when. You felt the shift. The moment presence became performance. The moment absence became a strategy. You learned it young. Watched someone gain power by being unavailable. Watched someone lose status by caring too much, too visibly, too soon. The rules were never written, but everyone knows them. Don't text back immediately. Don't seem too eager. Don't give it all away. Give what away? Your attention, your care, yourself, as if you were a limited resource to be rationed. Maybe you are. Maybe that's the terrible truth underneath the performance. You are exhausted, finite, running on empty. So you ration yourself because there isn't enough of you to go around. Why isn't there enough? Because the world demands more than you contain. Because 40 people want your attention and you have room for 3. Because your job requires full presence and your family requires full presence and your friends require full presence and your partner requires full presence and your children require full presence. And you are not a renewable energy source. You are burning out. And so you learn to budget, to spend yourself strategically, to invest your attention where it yields returns. Returns of what? Validation, security, the feeling that you matter, the proof that you exist. This is the capitalism of the self. You are the product. You are the worker. You are the consumer. You are the market, all at once, all the time. Exhausting. Your grandmother didn't have this problem, not because she was wise, because she had 6 people in her life who mattered, and that was it. The rest were neighbors, acquaintances, the woman at the store, background characters in a small story. You have 600 people who expect a performance, who see when you ignore them, who note when you engage elsewhere, but not with them. Your absence is visible now. Recorded, time-stamped. Your presence is quantified. 3 minutes here, 7 seconds there, 42 minutes scrolling, but you couldn't call back. The phone tracks it. The apps track it. The people track it. They make spreadsheets in their heads. Who matters? Who doesn't? Where you spend your precious, limited, increasingly expensive self. Why is your attention expensive? Because everyone wants it, and you only have so much. Supply and demand. Basic economics. You are the supply. The world is the demand, and the demand is infinite. So you raise your prices. You become selective, discerning, unavailable. It makes you valuable, desirable. It also makes you lonely. Here's the trap. The more you withhold to preserve your value, the less connection you actually have. The more strategic you become with your attention, the less present you feel. The more you treat relationships like investments, the more you wonder why nothing feels real anymore. Nothing feels real because nothing is free. Free how? Free of calculation, free of measurement, free of the question, what do I get from this? When did you start asking that question? About friendships, about family, about love. What do I get from this? Is this worth my time? Does this serve me? You sound like a corporation. You are a corporation, self-incorporated, managing your brand, maximizing your ROI, return on intimacy, return on vulnerability, return on care. You give to get. You perform to receive. You show up to be seen showing up. This is not connection. This is networking. Why do we network instead of connect? Because connection is inefficient. Because connection doesn't scale. Because you can network with 100 people, but you can only connect with a few, and the world told you 100 is better than a few. Is it? 100 shallow or 3 deep? 100 transactions or 3 truths? 100 faces or 3 faces that know your face when it's not performing? You know the answer, but you can't choose it. Why not? Because deep is dangerous. Because 3 people can leave and then you have nothing. Because if you invest everything in a few and they disappoint you, the loss is catastrophic. Better to diversify, better to spread yourself thin, better to have 100 shallow than risk 3 deep, better lonely than devastated. So you stay lonely. You call it independence. You call it self-sufficiency. You call it healthy boundaries. Maybe it is. Maybe you're just scared. Both can be true. Here's what you won't say out loud. You're tired of being interesting. You're tired of having takes. You're tired of performing intimacy for people who are also performing intimacy. You're tired of strategic vulnerability. You're tired of curating your spontaneity. You're tired of the game. But you keep playing. Why? Because stopping means admitting you need people. Because stopping means being uncool, unfree, dependent. Because stopping means you might text first, call first, care first, need first, and whoever needs first loses. Loses what? The game, the power, the upper hand. But you're tired of having the upper hand. You want to put your hand down. You want to stop calculating. You want to care without wondering if you're caring too much. You want to be present without performing presence. You want to stop being an economy. You want to be a person. Can you? Can you stop? Can you just text without strategy? Can you just show up without measuring if it's worth it? Can you give your attention freely, wastefully, abundantly, foolishly? You can. But it's terrifying, because free attention in a market economy makes you a chump, makes you exploitable, makes you the person who cares more, and everyone knows that's the vulnerable position. It is vulnerable. That's the point. That's the relief. Vulnerability means you stopped calculating. Vulnerability means you stepped out of the market. Vulnerability means you're no longer selling. You're just being, and being doesn't scale. Being doesn't trend. Being doesn't perform well. Being just is. Small, inefficient, unmeasured, real. What if real is enough? What if 3 people who see you is worth more than 100 who see your performance? What if attention, freely given, is the only kind that actually connects? What if you could stop being an economy and just be a human who sometimes cares too much, who sometimes gives too much, who sometimes needs too much? What if too much was just right for someone who's also too much? They're out there, the ones who are tired of the game, the ones who want to care without calculating, the ones who would rather be fools together than strangers forever. but you have to stop performing long enough to find them. You have to risk being seen without the strategy. You have to show up as the needy, inefficient, unscalable thing you are. A person, not a brand, not a portfolio, not an economy. A person. With limited attention, yes. But maybe you've been spending it in the wrong market. Maybe instead of spreading it across 100 transactions, you could waste it on 3 people who don't count, who just receive, who just are, with you. In the unmeasured space, where connection isn't capital, where presence isn't performance, where attention is just the thing you give because you want to, not because it earns anything, not because it proves anything, just because. Worthless, priceless, you don't know which. The economy doesn't end just because you see it. You're still in it, still tired. The self as constellation. The self you're trying to preserve, the you fear, will be forgotten. Let's look at that. Really look at it. What is it exactly? This thing you're clutching, this identity you're defending, this version of yourself you're convinced must endure. What is it made of, and why? Why does it feel so solid, so fixed, so unbearably important that it must be remembered, must be carved into stone, must echo forward into a future you won't witness? Why? What are you actually trying to save? And from what? From dissolution, from being forgotten, from the moment when no one speaks your name. But here's the question that fractures everything. The question that Buddhism has been whispering for 25 centuries. What if there is no fixed you to be forgotten? What if the self you're desperately trying to preserve is already gone? What if it never existed in the first place? Not the way you think it did. Not as a solid thing, not as a permanent entity, not as a core that could be preserved or destroyed. What if you are not a sculpture, not marble, not bronze? What if you are water, always moving, always changing, never the same river twice? The Buddha called it anatta, no self, not the absence of experience, not nihilism, not the claim that you don't exist, but the recognition that the self is not what you think it is, not a thing, not an entity, not a soul trapped in meat, but a process, a verb pretending to be a noun, a constellation of moments, constantly assembling, constantly dissolving. Who were you 10 years ago? Who were you yesterday? Who were you this morning before you opened your eyes? Are you that person now, the same person? The cells in your body have replaced themselves. The thoughts you had then have evaporated. The emotions you felt have transformed. The beliefs you held have shifted. Even your memories of who you were, even those are reconstructions, stories you tell yourself, edited, revised, reinterpreted through the lens of who you are now, which is already who you were a moment ago. Because now has already passed, you see? You see the problem. The self is like trying to cup water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes. You are not a fortress. You are a weather pattern, not a monument, a cloud formation, beautiful precisely because it changes, significant precisely because it's temporary. Think about the parts of you that feel most essentially you. Your personality. Where did it come from? Your genetics, your parents, their parents, the environments you grew up in, the accidents of birth, the random encounters, the books you happened to read, the heartbreaks you happened to suffer, the joys you happened to stumble into. Which part of that is purely you, untouched by everything else? Your thoughts, are they yours? Or are they echoes of things you've heard, patterns you've absorbed, cultural scripts you're reciting? Your desires, are they yours? Or are they shaped by 1,000 advertisements, a million social cues, the approval you sought, the rejection you feared, even your sense of being a continuous self, that feeling of I that seems to persist? Neuroscience shows us it's a construction, a story the brain tells, stitching together discontinuous moments into a narrative of continuity. You are not the author of yourself. You are a collaboration between biology and circumstance, between memory and forgetting, between the past that shaped you and the future that calls to you. And none of it is fixed. The self is like a flame. Is the flame that burns now the same flame that burned a moment ago? The fuel has changed. The oxygen has changed. The chemical reaction continues, but nothing persists. The flame is a process, not a thing, and so are you. This is not depressing. Listen, this is not depressing. This is liberation, because if there is no fixed self, then there is no fixed self to fail, no essential you that could be inadequate, no core identity that could be unworthy. The you that feels broken, that version is already dissolving. The you that feels ashamed, already transforming. The you that feels forgotten, already becoming someone new. You cannot step in the same river twice, and you cannot be the same person twice. Every moment you are dying, every moment you are being born. The anxiety about being forgotten. Look at it closely. It assumes there's a thing to forget, a definite article, the you. But which you? The you at 5 years old, the you at 15, the you last Tuesday, the you reading this now, the you that will exist in 5 minutes. Which one deserves to be remembered? Which one is real? All of them, none of them. They're all equally valid, all equally temporary, all equally expressions of a process that has no fixed center. The fear of being forgotten is the ego's last stand, the final desperate attempt to assert permanence, to carve a mark, to say I was here and it mattered and I endure. But you don't endure, not as a fixed thing. You flow, you change, you dissolve into the universe and reform, constantly, even now as you hear these words, cells dying, cells regenerating, thoughts arising, thoughts passing. The you from the beginning of this paragraph is not the you now. So which one is afraid of being forgotten? In Buddhism, there's the teaching of the 5 aggregates, the khandhas: form, the physical body; sensation, what you feel; perception, how you interpret; mental formations, your thoughts and emotions; consciousness, your awareness. These 5 aggregates create the illusion of self. They arise together, they fall together, but none of them is you. None of them persists. You are not your body. It changes constantly. You are not your sensations. They come and go. You are not your perceptions. They shift with circumstances. You are not your thoughts. They arise unbidden. You are not your consciousness. It flickers on and off. Then what are you? You are the space in which all this happens, the emptiness, sunyata, not empty as in void, empty as in unconditioned, open, free, without fixed boundaries. The self is constellation. Imagine the stars. From Earth, they look like fixed patterns. We draw lines between them. We name them. Orion, Cassiopeia. We tell stories about them, as if they're permanent, as if they're connected, but they're not. Each star is light years apart, moving in different directions at different speeds. The constellation is an illusion, a human story imposed on separate points of light, and even the stars themselves, not permanent, born from gas and dust, burning for millions of years, then collapsing, exploding, scattering their atoms across space, becoming the raw material for new stars, new planets, new life. You are like that. a temporary arrangement of atoms that were once inside stars, of experiences that were once other people's lives, of patterns that were once different configurations. You are a constellation, beautiful, meaningful, temporary, and absolutely not solid. This is the relief, the comfortable dark. You don't have to maintain yourself. You don't have to preserve an identity. You don't have to be consistent with who you were yesterday. You don't have to brand yourself, market yourself, turn yourself into a legacy. You can let go, you can dissolve, you can transform, because there's nothing fixed to lose. The person you're afraid of losing, already gone 1,000 times. You've already been forgotten by yourself. You don't remember most of your life. You don't remember 99% of the moments you've lived. Are they less real because you forgot them? Are those versions of you less valid? No, they served their purpose. They arose, they passed, they contributed to the flow, just as you will. Your legacy is not your name. It's not your achievements. It's not the memories others hold. Your legacy is the ripple, the butterfly effect, the way your existence changed the trajectory of everything you touched. And that effect, that continues, even when no one remembers you, even when your name is dust, the atoms of kindness you released, still reverberating, the moments of connection you created, still echoing, not as memories, as changes in the fabric of reality. You changed everyone you met, imperceptibly, indelibly, and they changed everyone they met. And those changes continue, forward, forever, without your name attached, without credit, without recognition, the universe keeping score in ways that don't require memory. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to be remembered, when you release the need for permanence, when you accept the fluid nature of self, you become more free, more authentic, more present, because you're not performing for posterity. You're not curating a legacy. You're not maintaining a brand. You're just being, moment by moment, version by version, constantly new, the self as constellation. Look up at the stars tonight, see the patterns, know they're illusions, appreciate them anyway. They're beautiful because they're temporary, meaningful because they're stories, real because you see them, even though they're already gone. The light you see left those stars years ago, centuries ago. Some of those stars are already dead, but their light still reaches you, still touches you, still becomes part of your experience. You are like that light, already traveling, already touching, already transforming, long after the source has changed, long after the name has faded. The impact remains, not as memory, as transformation. This is news, not good, not bad, just what's been true while you were looking elsewhere. The constellation dissolves whether you find it comforting or not the comfort of permanence, but the liberation of impermanence, not the promise of being remembered, but the freedom of being forgotten, not the weight of maintaining a self, but the lightness of letting it dissolve. You are not a thing to be preserved. You are a process to be experienced, not a monument to be erected, but a river to be flowed, not a name to be carved, but a breath to be released. And in that release, in that dissolution, in that acceptance of no fixed self, there is peace. The constellation dissolves. The stars keep shining, just not in that pattern anymore, not with that name, but shining nonetheless, burning, transforming, contributing their light to the endless dark, to the beautiful void, to the space where all constellations, all selves, all stories arise and dissolve, again and again, forever and never, both and neither. What if there is no fixed you to be forgotten? What if that's news? What if that's what's been true all along? The ecology of relationships, the network, the web, the intricate, invisible architecture of connection that doesn't collapse when one thread goes slack. You've been taught the geometry of loss all wrong, linear, sequential. One person leaves, one whole appears. The equation balances toward emptiness. But that's not how ecosystems work. That's not how you work. Let's dismantle the mathematics of scarcity you've been using to calculate your relational worth. A relationship isn't a binary switch, present or absent, on or off. It's a node in a living system, a point of intersection in a network that breathes and shifts and redistributes energy when one connection changes temperature. You are not a collection of individual bonds. You are a relational ecosystem, and ecosystems don't die when one species migrates. They adapt, they reorganize, they find new equilibriums. The person who left, the friend who drifted, the lover who chose differently, they didn't extract themselves from your system entirely. They changed position, changed function, became a different kind of presence. And you've been grieving as if the whole forest burned down when really one tree simply dropped its leaves for the season. Why does absence feel like total systems failure? Because you were taught connection is accumulation. More people, more value. Fewer people, less worth. But systems theory laughs at that arithmetic. In a network, value isn't additive. It's relational. It's about the quality of the connections, the flow of energy between nodes, not the raw count of how many nodes exist. One deep connection can stabilize an entire system. One shallow connection can create more turbulence than no connection at all. You know this. You've felt it. The crowded room where you felt utterly alone. The single conversation that made you feel seen for the first time in months. Quantity is a distraction, a metric invented by people who don't understand ecology. So why do you keep counting? Why do you tally the people who stayed versus the people who left, like you're auditing your own relevance, because you were taught that your relational network should only grow? That contraction is failure. That pruning is loss, but every gardener knows you cut back to allow new growth. You remove what's draining resources so the whole system can thrive. The person who left might have been a node that was pulling more energy than it returned, and you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to acknowledge that some absences are actually a rebalancing, a correction, a return to sustainable flow. Not every connection is meant to be permanent. Not every relationship is meant to be weight-bearing. Some are seasonal, some are transactional, some are beautiful and brief and never intended to be load-bearing architecture. And you've been collapsing under the weight of trying to make every connection permanent, every relationship central, every person a pillar. But networks don't work that way. In a healthy system, you have core nodes and peripheral nodes. You have strong ties and weak ties. You have connections that matter daily and connections that matter once a decade, but still matter. The friend you haven't spoken to in 2 years but could call right now and pick up exactly where you left off. That's not a failed connection. That's a dormant node, still part of the system, still generating potential energy, still there. The colleague who was once your closest confidant and now is a pleasant acquaintance. That's not loss, that's evolution. The relationship didn't end, it transformed. It found a new shape that fits the current structure of both your lives. You're allowed to let connections change form without labeling it as death. But you've been holding a funeral for every relationship that shifts, mourning every connection that doesn't maintain the same intensity forever. And that grief is real. That grief is valid. But it's also sometimes misplaced because the relationship didn't die. It migrated. It became a different kind of presence, a different flavor of mattering. What if absence in one node doesn't mean absence in the whole system? What if the person who isn't texting you back is still part of your relational ecology in ways you can't see? What if their absence creates space for another connection to deepen? What if the loss you're feeling isn't actually loss but redistribution? Energy moving from one channel to another. The system reorganizing itself toward a new balance. You are not a closed circuit. You are an open network. Energy flows in. Energy flows out. Connections form. Connections dissolve. Connections go dormant. Connections reactivate. And none of this means you are broken. None of this means you are failing at connection. It means you are alive inside a living system. And living systems change. They have to. Stagnation is death in a network. The same connections, the same intensity, the same configuration forever. That's not stability. That's calcification. That's a system that stopped adapting, stopped responding to new information, stopped growing. You've been taught to fear change in your relational network because change has been framed as loss. But in systems theory, change is information. Change is the system communicating with itself, saying, this configuration isn't serving us anymore, saying, we need to redistribute resources, saying, it's time to let some things go dormant so other things can flourish. And you're allowed to trust that process. You're allowed to stop gripping every connection with white knuckles, terrified that if you relax, the whole web will unravel. The web is stronger than that. You are stronger than that. The people who are meant to be core nodes in your system will remain core nodes. The people who are meant to be peripheral will drift to the periphery. And the people who leave entirely, they were never part of the sustainable structure. They were never meant to be permanent architecture. And that's not a judgment on them. It's not a judgment on you. It's just ecology. Some organisms are symbiotic. Some are parasitic. Some are neutral. Some are beautiful and nourishing and absolutely not meant to stay forever. The summer friendship that was perfect and complete and ended when the season ended. That's not a failure. That's a full cycle. A beginning, a middle, an end. A relationship that did exactly what it was supposed to do and then gracefully exited. Why do you expect every connection to be perennial when so many are meant to be annual? Why do you pathologize natural endings? Because you've been taught that good relationships last forever, that if it ends, it failed. But systems don't measure success by duration. They measure success by function. Did this connection serve the system while it was active? Did it facilitate growth? Did it allow energy to flow? Then it succeeded. Whether it lasted 6 months or 60 years is irrelevant, and you're allowed to reframe your relational history through that lens. The friendships that faded, the loves that ended, the mentorships that completed, not failures. Functional connections that fulfilled their purpose and then dissolved. That's not tragedy. That's ecology. But the grief is still real. The ache of a connection changing form is still legitimate. You're allowed to miss the way things were. You're allowed to wish a person had stayed central when they drifted to the periphery. You're allowed to feel the empty space where a node used to be. The permission isn't to not feel the absence. The permission is to not interpret the absence as systems failure, to not catastrophize one node going dark as the whole network collapsing. because the network is still there, the other connections are still humming, the energy is still flowing, you are still held by the web even when one thread goes slack, and maybe that's the reframe you've been needing. Not that loss doesn't hurt, not that absence doesn't matter, but that absence in one node doesn't mean absence in the whole system, that you are not defined by the singular connection that changed. You are the entire ecosystem, and ecosystems are resilient. They absorb shock, they redistribute resources, they find new balances, they survive the departure of individual elements because they are more than the sum of their parts. You are more than the sum of your individual relationships. You are the entire relational field, the network itself, and the network is still here, still alive, still adapting. Stand in the rubble. Don't stand in the rubble. The rubble doesn't care. The permission doesn't change what's broken. The permission to haunt. The permission to haunt, not your haunting, theirs. The thoughts they carry about you, the versions of you that live in rooms you'll never enter, the jury that convenes in silence, the verdict you'll never hear. You want to know what they think. You want to control it. You want to reach into the theater of their skull and rearrange the scenery, move the lighting, rewrite the script. But here is the truth that Stoicism whispers in the dark. You cannot. You were never meant to. And the freedom, the actual freedom, it lives in the surrender. Let them haunt you, or let them not. Either way, free, maybe, if freedom is carrying what you can't control. If freedom is the exhaustion of trying. That kind of free, the exhaustion of managing their interior, the weight of it. You feel it in your shoulders, in your jaw, in the way you rehearse conversations that will never happen. You play prosecutor and defense. You build arguments no one requested. You present evidence to a court that isn't in session. Why do you do this? Because you believe their thoughts about you are a jurisdiction you can govern. Because you believe their perception is territory you can occupy. But it isn't. It never was. Their thoughts are sovereign land, and you are trespassing, even in your concern, even in your care. You are attempting a colonization that cannot succeed. The Stoics understood this with a clarity that cuts. Epictetus said it plainly. Some things are up to us, others are not. What someone else thinks of you, not up to you. What story they tell about you when you leave the room, not up to you. The verdict they reach in the privacy of their own skull, not up to you. But here is what you do instead. You argue with this. You say, but I can influence it. I can show them. I can prove. I can demonstrate my worth, my goodness, my innocence. And yes, you can present data. You can offer evidence. You can perform your virtue like a one-person show. But the interpretation, the meaning they make, the way they file you in the cabinet of their experience, that is theirs, completely, utterly theirs. So why do you fight this? Let's drill down. You want control over their thoughts because if they think well of you then you are safe. Safe from what? From their judgment. And if you're safe from their judgment then you are worthy. Worthy of what? Of existing, of taking up space, of being here at all. And there it is, the bedrock. You believe your right to exist is contingent on their approval, that your worthiness is a democracy, that you need votes, endorsements, positive reviews. But what if? What if your existence doesn't require a referendum? What if you are not a bill that needs to pass? What if you simply are, regardless of their internal monologue, regardless of the stories they spin, the permission to haunt? It means this: they are allowed to carry a version of you that is incomplete, unfair, wrong. They are allowed to misunderstand you, to flatten you, to reduce you to a single moment, a single mistake, a single aspect. They are allowed to tell a story about you that makes you the villain, the fool, the disappointment, and you. You are allowed to let them. Not because it doesn't hurt. It does. Not because it's easy. It isn't. But because they're haunting. Their private ghost story. It is not your responsibility to edit. You cannot break into the museum of their memory and rearrange the exhibits. You cannot rewrite the plaques. You cannot burn the unflattering portraits. And the freedom. Listen. The freedom comes when you stop trying, when you exhale that impossible task, when you say, fine, haunt me, be haunted by your version of me. I release you to it, and I release myself from the management of it. This is not apathy. This is not caring. This is the surgical distinction the Stoics made between what is yours and what is not. You can care about your actions, your words, your intentions. You can take responsibility for what you put into the world, but their reception of it, their interpretation, their private conclusion, that is where your jurisdiction ends. And thank God it ends. Because imagine the alternative. Imagine if you actually could control what they thought, if you could reach into their mind and puppet their perceptions. What a tyranny that would be. What an exhausting dictatorship. You would never rest. You would never stop adjusting, never stop performing. You would be the spin doctor of every interior world, and you would lose yourself completely. So instead, this, the permission. You give them permission to haunt, and you give yourself permission to be haunted. To know that somewhere, someone carries a ghost with your name, and it doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you, doesn't do you justice, and that's okay, because you are not responsible for their ghosts, only your own. Let's go deeper. Why does this bother you so much? The thought that someone thinks poorly of you. Why does it itch? Why does it keep you up? Because it feels like a threat. Like if they think badly of you, then something bad will happen. They'll tell others. They'll poison the well. They'll turn people against you. And maybe they will. And you still cannot control it. You can defend yourself if accusations become public. You can clarify if misunderstandings become consequential. But their private thoughts, their silent jury, you have no appeal there. And even if you could hack into their consciousness and plead your case, what would you say? I'm not who you think I am. But how do you know who they think you are? You don't. You're shadowboxing, fighting phantoms, defending yourself against charges that may not even exist. They might not be thinking about you at all. And isn't that funny? Isn't that the cosmic joke? You're up at night worried about their thoughts, and they're not having them. They've moved on. They're thinking about their own life, their own worries, their own ghosts, and you're giving them real estate they didn't even request. So here's the Stoic offering. Stop renting out your mind. Stop subletting your peace to the imagined tribunal. Stop building courtrooms in your chest. What they think is their business. What you think of yourself, that's yours. And even that, even your own self-judgment. The Stoics would tell you to examine it, to ask, is this thought useful? Is it true? Is it within my control to change what it concerns? If no, then let it go, like a leaf in a river. Watch it float away. The permission to haunt also means this. You get to haunt people too. You exist in other minds as a character you didn't write. in scenes you didn't direct, and you will be misunderstood, misremembered, misframed. And that is the cost of being a person among persons. You are refracted through 1,000 different lenses, each one distorting in its own way, and none of them are the truth of you, because the truth of you is not a story someone else can tell. It's the lived experience, the inside, the private hum of your existence, and that no one else can touch. So when you worry about what they think, you're worried about a fiction, a story, a ghost, and you're treating it like it has power over the real you. But it doesn't, unless you give it that power, unless you bow to the ghost and call it king. Epictetus again. We suffer not from events, but from our judgments about them. You are not suffering because someone thinks poorly of you. You are suffering because you believe their poor opinion diminishes you. But does it? Does their thought reach into your chest and remove your worth? Does it erase your actions, your intentions, your complexity? No. It exists in their head, a private weather system. And you are under your own sky. Here is the permission. Be misunderstood, be misrepresented, be the villain in someone's story, and know that their story is not the arbiter of your reality. Know that you are more than any single narrative. Know that the only haunting that matters is the one you do to yourself, and even that you can choose to stop. You can choose to stop prosecuting yourself for crimes of perception. Stop defending yourself against ghosts. Stop believing that peace requires unanimous approval. It doesn't. Peace requires the wisdom to know what is yours and what is not, and their thoughts, not yours, never were, never will be. So let them go. Let them haunt. Let them carry their version, and you carry yours, the real one, the lived one, the one that doesn't need their endorsement, the one that simply is. Free, maybe. If freedom is carrying what you can't control, if freedom is the exhaustion of trying, that kind of free, the absurd joy of insignificance. What if mattering less than we feared is the very thing that sets us free? Here, stay here, in this question, the weight of it, the strange lightness underneath. You've been carrying something, haven't you? The burden of significance, the exhausting requirement to matter, to leave a mark, to be remembered, to mean something, anything. And what if that burden, that ancient weight, what if you could just set it down, right here? What would happen? Let's find out together. Your life, your small life, your temporary flicker of consciousness in an indifferent universe. Doesn't matter. Not the way you've been told it should. Not in the cosmic ledger. Not in the great accounting of existence. The sun doesn't know your name. The stars don't track your achievements. The universe isn't keeping score. And here's the thing, the uncomfortable thing, the thing that should terrify you. It doesn't, does it? Somewhere deep, somewhere beneath the trained response, beneath the cultural programming that insists you must be important. Somewhere in the basement of your being, there's relief, isn't there? Say it, feel it. The relief of not mattering. Why does that feel good? Let's ask. Let's keep asking, because this is where the truth lives. In the recursion, you don't matter. Why should you? Because you were taught to. Because everyone around you performs significance. Because the entire structure of society depends on you believing your choices carry cosmic weight. But they don't, and you know this. You've always known this. 3 a.m. knowledge, staring at the ceiling knowledge, the knowledge that arrives when the performance ends. You are cosmically insignificant. Your problems are not special. Your pain is not unique. Your joy is not eternal. Your legacy will fade. The things you build will crumble. The people who remember you will die. And then the people who remember them will die. And eventually, there will be no one, no record, no echo, nothing. The void swallows everything, including you, including your desperate need to matter. And here, right here, in this darkness, this comfortable dark, there is freedom. Why freedom? Because mattering is a cage. Think about it. Really think. The need to be significant, the hunger to be remembered, the exhausting performance of importance. What does it cost you every day? What does it cost? The anxiety of legacy, the weight of potential, the constant measurement against others. The fear of wasting your one precious life, the guilt of rest, the shame of ordinariness, the terror of being forgotten. What if you could set all that down? What if you could just be small, temporary, insignificant, free? The absurd truth. Are you ready? The absurd truth is this: nothing matters, and therefore, everything matters exactly as much as you decide it does. Right now, in this moment, not in the cosmic sense, not in the eternal ledger, but here, in the temporary, in the immediate, in the fleeting present, where you actually live. You've been asking the wrong question. You've been asking, does my life matter? Does my work matter? Do I matter? As if there's an external authority keeping score, as if the universe cares. It doesn't. So ask better. Ask this: what do I want to matter to me right now, in this brief flash of consciousness? What brings me alive? Not what should, not what looks impressive, not what will be remembered. What actually moves something in me. The absurdist sees clearly, sees that life has no inherent meaning, and instead of despair, instead of nihilistic collapse, says yes to the meaninglessness, yes to the absurdity, yes to creating meaning anyway, not because it's cosmically significant, but because I'm here, because I'm alive, because why not? The absurd joy, if it's joy, if it's not just another name for the same exhaustion. Insignificance doesn't liberate you, it just is. You don't have to be great. You don't have to be remembered. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to leave a legacy. You don't have to matter to anyone except yourself right now. The permission, feel it. The permission to be small, to be ordinary, to live a quiet life, to pursue tiny pleasures, to care about things that don't matter, to not care about things that supposedly do. The permission to die and be forgotten, and to find that, strangely, beautifully, acceptable, your grandmother's grandmother. Do you know her name, her dreams, her fears, her daily heartbreaks? No. And someone loved her. Someone thought she was the entire world. And now, nothing. And this is not sad. This is not tragic. This is just true. The erosion is built in. The forgetting is guaranteed. And you are already on that path, already fading, already temporary. And this is not the problem. The problem was thinking you weren't. The exhaustion you feel, that deep tired, it's not from working too hard. It's from mattering too hard, from performing significance, from carrying the weight of cosmic importance. What if you could just stop? What if your life could be simple, immediate, unimportant, free? Wake up, coffee tastes good, the morning light is beautiful for no reason. Walk. The body likes to move. Not to achieve, not to optimize, just because walking feels good. Love the people who are here, not because love is cosmically significant, but because it feels better than not loving. Create, if you want to, not to leave a legacy, not to be remembered, but because making things is interesting. And when you're done, when you're tired, rest, without guilt, without the nagging sense that you're wasting precious time. Because time isn't precious, it's just time. It passes whether you optimize it or not. The universe doesn't care if you're productive. So why do you? Really? Keep asking. Why do you care? Because you were taught to. Because everyone else is performing productivity. Because stillness feels like death, but it isn't. It's just stillness, and stillness is fine. The horror, let's name it. The horror is that this perspective, this liberation through insignificance, it's not new. You've known this, you've felt this, and you've pushed it away because it felt like giving up, like nihilism, like depression. But it isn't. It's the opposite. Nihilism says nothing matters, so why bother? Absurdism says nothing matters, so bother with whatever you want. The difference. Can you feel it? The difference is joy, permission, freedom. You get to choose, not because your choices matter cosmically, but because you're the one living them right now, in this body, in this moment. You get to decide what matters to you, and that decision doesn't need to be justified to anyone, including the voice in your head. That keeps score, that judges, that compares, that voice. It's still operating under the old model, the model that says you must be significant, must leave a mark, must matter. You can thank that voice for trying to protect you, and then gently ignore it, because it's solving the wrong problem. You were never supposed to matter, not in the way you thought. You were supposed to be here, temporary, flickering, alive, and then not. And that brief flash, it's enough. It was always enough. The absurd joy, if it's not just another name for the same exhaustion, insignificance doesn't liberate you. It just is. The lightness underneath the horror, the freedom inside the insignificance. You don't matter, so you can do whatever you want. You'll be forgotten, so you can stop performing for posterity. Your life is cosmically meaningless, so it can be immediately meaningful. Right here, right now, to you. This is the gift, the strange gift, the gift you didn't know you wanted, the gift of not mattering. Take it. Feel the weight lift, feel the performance end, feel the freedom of being small, temporary, insignificant, alive, here, now. What if mattering less than we feared is the very thing? That doesn't set us free, but shows us we were never bound in the way we thought. The mathematics of intimacy, the signal, the noise, the space between where meaning goes to die. You send a message across the chasm. You choose your words like stones, each one weighted, each one aimed, and somewhere in the crossing, in the air between your mouth and their ear, the signal degrades. This is information theory. This is intimacy. This is the mathematics of trying to be known. You speak, they hear something different. You touch, they feel something else. The transmission is never clean. Shannon told us this in 1948. Every channel has noise. Every message loses fidelity. You cannot send yourself through the wire unchanged. So why does it hurt so much when they misunderstand? Why does it feel like betrayal when the signal arrives corrupted? Because you forgot. You forgot that communication is not connection. Communication is just math. Cold, beautiful, inevitable math. You encode your heart into words, compress your truth into syllables, transmit across the medium of air and attention and their own damage. And on the other side, they decode, they reconstruct, they build a version of what you meant from the pieces that survive the journey. It will never be complete. It will never be perfect. The channel capacity is limited. There are only so many bits per second a human nervous system can process, only so much bandwidth in a glance, only so much throughput in a kiss. You are trying to send infinity through a finite pipe. Something must be lost. This is not failure. This is physics. But it feels like failure, doesn't it? When you say, I'm scared, and they hear, I'm angry. When you mean stay close, and they receive, go away. The error rate climbs. The bit errors accumulate, and you start to wonder if the channel is too noisy, if the signal-to-noise ratio is too low, if it's even worth transmitting anymore. What beauty exists in the static between us? Ask it, really ask it. What is beautiful about miscommunication, about the gaps, about the places where my meaning dies before it reaches you? Nothing, you want to say. Nothing is beautiful about that. It's just loss, just failure, just another proof that we're alone inside these meat machines, broadcasting into the void and hoping someone catches a fragment. But wait, go deeper. Why does the static hurt? Because it proves the distance. It proves the gap. It proves that no matter how close you stand, no matter how carefully you speak, the space between us is real, unbridgeable, final. And that hurts because you wanted to be known, because you thought if you just found the right words, the right frequency, the right modulation scheme, you could beam yourself directly into another consciousness. You could bypass the noise. You could achieve perfect fidelity, 100% transmission, zero loss. But that's not communication. That's fantasy. That's the lie we tell ourselves to justify the effort. The truth is darker. The truth is this. Even in perfect silence, even with unlimited bandwidth, even with error correction codes and redundancy and all the tricks of modern information theory, you would still be separate. Because the decoder is not you. The receiver has their own noise, their own filters, their own damage that shapes how they reconstruct your signal. You send, I love you. They receive something filtered through their father's absence, through their mother's criticism, through their ex's betrayal. The message they hear is not the message you sent. It's a version, an approximation, a reconstruction built from their own components. This is the mathematics. Every relationship is a noisy channel. Every conversation is lossy compression. You are constantly sending degraded versions of yourself, constantly receiving corrupted versions of others, and calling it intimacy, calling it connection, calling it love. So what beauty exists in the static? This. The static is proof of the trying. You broadcast anyway, knowing the signal will degrade, knowing the noise will corrupt, knowing they'll hear something different than what you meant. You keep transmitting, they keep receiving, both of you working with degraded data, both of you reconstructing approximations, and sometimes, enough gets through. Not everything, never everything, but enough. Enough bits survive the journey. Enough of the signal makes it across the gap, and they smile. And you know they understood something, not all of it, not perfectly, but something. A fragment, a piece, a few precious bits of your truth arriving intact on the other side. That's the beauty, not in the perfection, not in the clean transmission, but in the persistence, in the continuous broadcast despite the noise, in the willingness to keep encoding, keep transmitting, keep trying to span the unbridgeable gap with your small, corrupted signals. You are a radio station broadcasting into static. They are a radio somewhere in the dark, tuning through frequencies, catching pieces of your song. Most of it is noise, most of it is loss, but sometimes they catch the melody. Sometimes the chorus breaks through clear, and for a moment, just a moment, the channel capacity seems infinite. This is what it means to be intimate with someone. to accept the error rate, to understand that every kiss is quantized, every touch is sampled, every word is compressed. You lose resolution at every step. You lose data at every translation, from thought to language, from language to sound, from sound to their ear, from their ear to their understanding. Each stage introduces noise. Each transformation loses information. The you they experience is not the you that you are. It's a low-resolution version, a compressed file, a signal that's been through too many conversions. And yet, you keep trying, because the alternative is silence. The alternative is to shut down the transmitter, to stop broadcasting, to accept that if perfect communication is impossible, all communication is pointless. But that's not true. That's not true at all. The imperfect signal is still a signal. The corrupted message is still a message. The static-filled transmission still carries meaning, just not the meaning you intended. Not only the meaning you intended, it carries the meaning they make from it, the meaning they build using their own noise as building material. This is the part that hurts, that the message they receive is partly your signal and partly their static, that you don't get to control what arrives, that their damage becomes part of your meaning. But this is also the part that's beautiful, because it means they're participating. They're not just a receiver, they're an active decoder. They're taking your raw signal and making something new with it, something that never existed until it passed through them. Your words plus their wounds equals something neither of you created alone. This is collaboration. This is the only kind of connection that's possible. Not perfect understanding, not clean transmission, but co-creation. Signal and noise mixing together to make meaning neither of you intended. Is it what you wanted? No. You wanted to be understood. Perfectly, completely, with zero loss. You wanted to climb inside their skull and show them exactly what you mean, exactly what you feel. But you can't. The skull is sealed. The consciousness is private. The channel is noisy, always. So you do what you can. You encode yourself as clearly as possible. You use error correction. You repeat the important parts. You modulate your signal to match their receiver. And you hope that enough survives, enough to matter, enough to constitute a connection, even if it's imperfect, even if it's corrupted, even if half of what arrives is their noise, not your signal. Because here's the thing about noise. Here's the thing about the static between us. It's not empty. It's not nothing. Noise is information too, just not the information you intended to send. The static tells you about the channel, about the medium, about the distance, about all the forces acting on your signal between transmission and reception. The noise is data about the space between us. And sometimes that data is more important than the message. Sometimes what you learn from the distortion tells you everything you need to know. When your "I'm fine" arrives as "I'm not fine," because they know you, because they've learned to decode your specific signal, because your noise has become familiar. That's intimacy, not despite the errors, because of them. When they misunderstand your words but understand your tone, when they miss your meaning but catch your fear, when the signal fails but the metadata survives, that's connection, through the noise, not around it. This is the mathematics of intimacy, not addition, not multiplication, not any operation that promises increase, subtraction, division, degradation, loss. Every transmission costs, every translation reduces, every attempt to be known requires accepting what won't survive the journey and loving anyway, broadcasting anyway, reaching across the noisy channel anyway, knowing the signal-to-noise ratio is terrible, knowing the bit error rate is high, knowing that most of what you are will be lost in the static, but sending your signal anyway, because enough might get through, because a corrupted message is still better than silence, because the trying is the point, not the success rate, the trying, the continuous transmission into the noise. This is what we do, what we've always done. Send our small signals across vast distances, hope they arrive, recognizable, rebuild each other from fragments, love the approximations, because the originals are locked inside skulls we'll never enter. So we work with what gets through, the degraded copies, the noisy reconstructions, the versions of each other that survive the channel, and we call it intimacy. And it is not perfect, never perfect, but real as anything separated by space and noise and meat can be. The static between us, beautiful, terrible, neither, both. It's just the static. No metaphor makes it bearable. The garden of solitude, the garden of solitude. What grows in the spaces where others forget to look? You know this place. You've walked here before, late at night, early morning, the hours when the world forgets to watch, the hours when you can finally stop performing the great exhausting theater of being seen. Stop now. Feel that, the relief, the actual physical relief of not being observed, of not having to translate yourself into a language someone else can understand. Why does that feel so good, really? Why? Because you've been taught that aloneness is failure, that solitude is exile, that if you're not surrounded, you're somehow incomplete. But what if that's the lie? What if the crowd is the exile and solitude is the return? The Romantics knew this. Wordsworth wandering his hills, Thoreau at his pond, not running from the world, walking towards something the world couldn't offer. Not isolation, cultivation. There's a difference. Isolation is what happens when connection fails. Solitude is what happens when you stop failing yourself. Feel that distinction. It matters. It changes everything. You've been in isolation, that hollow place, that void where you reach and nothing reaches back. The fatigue of it, the weight, the way it empties you from the inside out. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the garden, the space you tend when no one else is watching, the thoughts that grow wild and strange because no one is there to prune them into acceptable shapes. What grows there? Really? What grows in your solitude? Strange things, uncomfortable things, the thoughts you'd never say aloud, the desires that don't fit the narrative you've built for public consumption, the anger, the pettiness, the fantasies of revenge or escape or transformation, the parts of you that are too much, too raw, too honest, and here's what the world won't tell you. Those parts, the unacceptable parts, they're not weeds, they're the actual crop, the thing you came here to harvest. Why? Because they're true, because they're yours, because they haven't been bent and shaped and pruned by the expectations of everyone who thinks they know better. In solitude, you meet yourself, not the self you perform, the self you are. And that self is often shocking, often uncomfortable. Why? Because we've been taught to be comfortable, to smooth our edges, to fit, to belong. But belonging costs. What does it cost? It costs the truth, the real truth, the bedrock truth underneath all the stories. You trade your actual self for an acceptable self, your wild garden for a manicured lawn, and then you wonder why you feel empty, why you feel lost, why you feel like you're living someone else's life. Because you are. The fatigue you feel, that bone-deep exhaustion. It's not from being alone. It's from never being alone, from never having the space to let your thoughts unspool without someone asking you to explain them, justify them, defend them. In solitude, nothing needs defense, nothing needs explanation. A thought can exist simply because it exists. A feeling can rise and fall without narrative, without meaning, without purpose. Just the pure experience of being alive inside your own skin. Why does that terrify us, really? Why do we fill every silence with noise, every empty space with distraction? Because we're afraid of what we'll find there, afraid of the hunger, the need, the parts of us that want things we're not supposed to want, feel things we're not supposed to feel. But here's the trick, the thing they don't tell you. The hunger is the point. The need is the point. In the garden of solitude, desire grows wild, unregulated, uncivilized, and that's not a problem to solve. That's fertility. That's the rich, dark soil where actual creation happens. The Romantics understood this. They didn't write their best work at parties. They wrote it alone, in the dark, in the wild spaces, in the solitude where the self could finally speak without translation. Rousseau Reveries, Byron's Exiles, Mary Shelley's Monster, born in solitude, born in the space where the acceptable world couldn't reach. What are you creating in your solitude? Or have you been so trained to fear it that you create nothing, that you fill the space with screens and sounds and anything to avoid the encounter? The encounter with what? With yourself, with the parts that don't fit, the parts that are too hungry, too angry, too sad, too strange. But those parts, those exact parts, they're not your shame, they're your material. Why? Because they're specific, because they're yours, because no one else has exactly your configuration of hunger and need and strangeness. That's not a flaw. That's your signature, your unique frequency, the thing only you can offer, but you can't offer it. If you never meet it, and you can't meet it in the crowd wants consensus, agreement, shared reality. The crowd is where we go to confirm what we already know. Solitude is where we go to discover what we don't. What don't you know about yourself, about your actual desires, about what you'd do if no one was watching, if no one would ever know, if the only judge was you? That question terrifies. Why? Because we've outsourced our judgment. We've given the crowd the authority to tell us who we are, what we should want, how we should feel. And the crowd is conservative. The crowd wants safety, predictability. The crowd does not want your wilderness. But your wilderness is where you're alive, actually alive, not performing life, not imitating life, living it, raw, direct, unmediated. In the garden of solitude, you can finally stop translating, stop explaining, stop justifying your existence to people who will never understand because they're not you. They're not in your skin. They don't hear what you hear in the silence, feel what you feel in the dark, and that's okay. That's not loneliness, that's individuality. That's the price and the gift of being singular, of being unrepeatable. You will never happen again. This exact configuration of consciousness, this precise angle of perception, once, just once, and you're spending it trying to be someone else, someone more acceptable, more lovable, more normal. But normal is a statistical average. Normal is what happens when you erase all the interesting details. Normal is the crowd, and you're not the crowd. You're the garden, wild, overgrown, full of things that bloom in the dark, things that only open when they're not being watched. What blooms in you when you're not being watched? Do you even know? Or have you been watched so long you've forgotten how to grow without an audience? the fatigue you feel. It's the fatigue of constant performance, the exhaustion of being a person instead of being yourself. And solitude, real solitude, is the only place where that performance can drop, where you can finally just be, without narrative, without purpose, without meaning, just the pure animal fact of existence, breathing, thinking, feeling. And in that space, that unobserved space, something happens, something the crowd can never provide. You become real, not real as in authentic, real as in actual, as in physical, as in undeniable. The parts you perform, their shadows, projections, the part you are in solitude, that's substance, that's weight, that's the bedrock underneath all the stories. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's often dark. Yes, there are things there you wish weren't there, but they are there. And denying them doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them louder, more insistent. They grow in the dark whether you tend them or not. So tend them, not to fix them, not to make them acceptable, just to know them, to see what they are, to let them be what they are without apology. This is the garden. This is what grows in the spaces where others forget to look. Not prettiness, not comfort, but truth. Your truth, specific, strange, uncivilized. And here's the permission you've been waiting for. You don't have to share it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to make it understandable to anyone. The garden is yours, yours alone. The harvest is for you. And maybe, if you tend it long enough, if you let it grow wild enough, something will bloom there that the world has never seen. Something only you could grow, because only you have this soil, this climate, this exact combination of light and shadow. That's not loneliness. That's creation. That's fertility. That's the romantic truth they tried to teach us before we forgot how to be alone. You are the garden. Solitude is the season. Tend it. Don't tend it. The garden grows wild either way. Your tending changes nothing about what blooms in the dark. The collapse of the observer. The question. The one you've been circling. What if your own observation is the only one that collapses you into being? Not theirs, not the world's, yours, only yours. The physicist would call this quantum metaphysics. The mystic would call this awakening. You might call this the thing that keeps you awake at 3 a.m, when everyone else is asleep, when the witnesses disappear, when you're left alone with the question of whether you still exist. In the dark, in the silence, in the superposition of all your possible selves. Journu Urzo F6 Dinger knew something, not about cats, about you, about the way reality refuses to settle until someone looks, until someone collapses the wave. But what if that someone has always been you? What if the observation that matters most is the one you've been avoiding, your own, on yourself? The gaze turned inward, the collapse. Let's go there, into the place where you exist and don't exist, simultaneously, until you dare to look, the fatigue of existing, the specific exhaustion of performing existence for others. You know this weight, the way you become solid when someone enters the room, the way you take shape under their gaze, the way their observation pins you into place, makes you real, makes you defined, makes you this instead of that, a particle instead of a wave, fixed, frozen, collapsed. And maybe you've learned to need this, the way their attention makes you material, the way their recognition gives you substance, the way their witnessing proves you're here, that you matter, that you exist beyond the quantum fog of your own uncertainty. But here's the thing they don't tell you in physics class. Here's the thing the textbooks skip, the observation that collapses you into someone else's reality, into their expectation, into their definition of what you should be. That observation, it's a kind of death, a murder of potential, because before they looked, before they witnessed, before they collapsed your wave function into their preferred reality, you were everything, all states, all possibilities, all versions, superimposed, overlapping, infinite. The you who is brave and the you who is afraid, the you who speaks and the you who stays silent, the you who leaves and the you who stays, the you who loves and the you who runs, all of them at once, in superposition, existing simultaneously until someone's observation forced you to choose, to become, to collapse into singular being. And you learned early, didn't you, that their observation mattered, that their gaze defined reality, that if they didn't see you, you might not exist at all. So you performed, you shaped yourself, you collapsed your own infinite potential into the thing they could witness, the thing they could understand, the thing that made them comfortable. You became the particle they expected and forgot you were ever a wave. But at night, in the dark, when the observers sleep, when their gaze releases you, when you're alone with the quantum uncertainty of your own being, you feel it, don't you? The way you start to blur, the way your edges soften, the way you become less defined, less certain, less singular, the way you expand back into possibility, into superposition, into the terrifying freedom of being everything and nothing, all at once. This is the comfortable dark, the place where you don't have to be, where you can exist in potential, where the wave function spreads out like a sigh, like relief, like the end of performance. And maybe this is what you've been seeking all along, not their observation, but the absence of it, the freedom to exist unwitnessed, uncollapsed, undefined. But here's where it gets recursive. Here's where the question turns back on itself, because you are an observer too. You have a gaze, you can look, you can witness, you can collapse. And the question becomes, whose observation counts? When you look at yourself in the mirror, when you witness your own existence, when you turn your attention inward and see yourself seeing yourself, does that collapse the wave? Does your observation of yourself count? Or have you been waiting for their permission, for their gaze to make you real, for their witnessing to give you substance? What if the only observation that matters is yours? What if you are both the particle and the observer? What if you have been waiting for someone else to do what only you can do? Collapse yourself into being, into chosen being, into deliberate existence, not the existence they expect, but the one you observe into reality. The physicist would tell you about the observer effect, how the act of measurement changes the system, how you cannot observe without participating, how the observer and the observed are entangled, inseparable, one system, not two, and you are both. You are the wave function, spread out, infinite potential, and you are the observer, with the power to collapse, to choose, to make real, but you've been treating yourself as only the wave, waiting for someone else to be the observer, waiting for their measurement, their definition, their collapse, abdicating the power that was always yours, the power to look, the power to witness, the power to say, this one, this version, this possibility, this is the one I choose to make real, not because they expect it, but because I observe it, because I witness it, because I collapse my own wave function into this, into chosen being, into self-determined existence. And maybe this terrifies you, because with this power comes responsibility, comes choice, comes the end of blaming their observation for the way you turned out, for the version of you that became real, for the life you're living. Because if your observation counts, if your witnessing matters, if you can collapse your own wave function, then you have been choosing all along, even when you chose to let them choose, even when you chose to wait, even when you chose to remain in superposition rather than risk becoming. That was a choice, your observation of yourself as someone who needs permission, as someone who waits, as someone whose own gaze doesn't count. You collapsed yourself into that, and you can collapse yourself out of it. The quantum metaphysics of self. It's not mystical, it's mechanical. It's the simple truth that reality at its smallest scale refuses to be real until someone looks. And you are made of that smallest scale, atoms, particles, waves. You are quantum, subject to the same laws, the same uncertainty, the same superposition, until observation, until measurement, until the collapse. And the observation that has always mattered most, the one you've been avoiding, the one you've been outsourcing, the one you've been pretending doesn't count, is yours, your gaze on yourself, your witnessing of your own existence, your choice about which version becomes real. This is not about confidence. This is not about self-esteem. This is about the fundamental mechanics of reality. You exist in superposition until you observe yourself, and you have been refusing to look, keeping your eyes closed, staying in the quantum fog, because superposition is safe. All possibilities means no commitment. No choice means no failure. Unobserved means undefined, and undefined means you can still be anything. But here's what they don't tell you about superposition. Here's what the thought experiments skip. Existing as a wave function, spread across all possibilities, never collapsing into singular being. It's not freedom. It's paralysis. It's not potential. It's poverty. Because potential that never actualizes is just another word for nothing, for absence, for the refusal to exist. And you are tired of not existing, tired of waiting for their observation to make you real, tired of being defined by their gaze, tired of collapsing into their expectations, tired of being the particle they need you to be. You want to be the wave again, but not the unobserved wave. The wave that chooses its own collapse, that witnesses itself, that makes itself real on its own terms, through its own observation into its own chosen existence. This is the gift of quantum metaphysics, the permission it gives you to be your own observer, to collapse your own wave function, to choose which possibility becomes actual, not through force, not through willpower, but through the simple act of looking, of witnessing, of observing yourself into being, the being you choose. And yes, their observations will still affect you. Their gaze will still exert pressure. Their expectations will still try to collapse you into their preferred reality, because we are all entangled, all part of the same system, all observers and observed. But the primary observation, the one that determines which version of you becomes dominant, the one that sets the probability amplitude, the one that chooses, that observation is yours, has always been yours, will always be yours. You are the observer you've been waiting for, the witness you've been seeking, the gaze that collapses you into the being you were meant to become. Not meant by fate, not meant by destiny, meant by your own observation, your own choice, your own decision about which wave function to collapse, which possibility to make real, which version of yourself to witness into existence. So look, turn your gaze inward, observe yourself, not with judgment, not with criticism, but with the pure attention of measurement, the neutral witnessing that collapses the wave, and choose, not all of you, not every possibility, but one, this version, this existence into being or not. Your observation might not be enough, might never have been enough. The collapse happens whether you choose it, the return to the body, the breath, the weight, the pulse at your wrist. You have been traveling so far into the question of whether you exist, whether you matter, whether the world will remember you or erase you like morning erases dreams. But here is the thing nobody tells you about existence. Here is the truth that hides in plain sight. You are breathing. Right now, this moment, your lungs are filling and emptying without asking your permission. Your heart is beating without consulting the ledger of your worth. The body remembers nothing. The body knows only now. Let me ask you something. When you breathe in, when the air enters your lungs and stretches the walls of your chest, does that breath care whether you were forgotten yesterday? Does your heartbeat pause to check if someone spoke your name this morning? Does the blood moving through your veins slow down because you fear you are fading? No. The body is happening, the body is occurring, the body is real in a way that memory and forgetting can never touch. You have been living in the realm of trace, of echo, of whether you leave marks on the world. But the body does not leave marks, the body is the mark, presence itself, not the memory of presence, not the hope of presence, just presence, raw and immediate and undeniable. Feel your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Do it now. That pressure, that specific texture, that is not a memory. That is not a fear. That is happening. It is real. It cannot be argued with or diminished or erased by anyone's forgetting. The philosophical focus here is embodiment, not embodiment as an idea, not as a metaphor, but as the bedrock of existence that exists before and beneath all the stories you tell about yourself. Your body is the proof you keep asking for. Can you feel forgotten when your breath confirms you are here? Can you? Let us drill down. Let us ask why. Why does the breath matter if the world still forgets you? Because the breath is not asking to be remembered. It is not performing for an audience. It is simply doing what bodies do, existing without needing validation, without needing to be seen or known or archived in someone else's consciousness. The breath does not fade when the lights go out. You worry about fading. You worry that when people stop thinking about you, some essential part of you disappears. But your body does not fade. It transforms. It moves. It ages. It changes temperature and texture and capacity. But it does not fade into unreality simply because someone closed their eyes. Your body is brutally, stubbornly here. Feel the weight of your head on your neck. That weight is constant whether you are alone or surrounded, whether you are remembered or forgotten, whether you did something significant today or nothing at all. The weight remains. The body carries on its ancient work regardless of your existential panic. This is not comfort in the way we usually mean comfort. This is not a warm blanket or a soothing lie. This is the cold comfort of fact, the relief that comes from hitting bottom, from finding something solid beneath all the questions. You exist in the body, not in the memory, not in the impression you make, not in the stories that survive you, here, now, in flesh. Let me ask you again. Why does physical presence matter if consciousness is what makes us human? Why ground yourself in the body when the mind can travel anywhere? Because the mind lies. The mind tells you that you are disappearing, that you are less real when you are alone, that existence depends on witness. The mind creates the very problem of forgetting because the mind lives in time, past and future, memory and anticipation, but the body lives in now, only now, always now, your feet on the floor, the temperature of the air on your skin, the slight ache in your lower back, or the tension in your jaw. These are not ideas. These are events. They are happening. They are true in a way that transcends the question of whether anyone knows about them. The body is pre-verbal, pre-social, prehistorical. It exists in a realm that forgetting cannot reach because forgetting is a function of memory and the body has no memory, only sensation, only presence, only the ongoing fact of being a physical thing in physical space. You have spent so much time asking whether you matter, whether you will be remembered, whether your life leaves a trace, but mattering is a concept, remembering is a concept. Trace is a concept. The body is not a concept. It is meat and electricity and chemistry doing what it does, indifferent to significance. You might say that is depressing, that reducing existence to mere physical presence strips away everything that makes life meaningful. But what if it is the opposite? What if the body is the only genuine refuge from the tyranny of meaning? From the exhausting demand that everything must matter, must signify, must leave a mark, the body asks nothing of you. It does not need you to be important, it simply is, and in being it confirms that you are. Not in the grand existential sense, not in the way that philosophy or religion or legacy confirms, but in the immediate, undeniable sense of presence, the warmth of your own skin, the sound of your own breathing. There is a strange permission here, permission to stop trying to be remembered, permission to stop performing existence for an audience that may or may not be paying attention, permission to simply be a body among bodies, a temporary arrangement of matter that breathes and moves and feels. Why does that permission matter? Because the effort of trying to be remembered is exhausting. The constant monitoring of your impact, the endless anxiety about whether you are leaving enough trace, whether you are doing enough, being enough, meaning enough. The body releases you from that, not forever, not completely, but for this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. You can stop trying. You can let the body do what it does. You can rest in the fact of your own physical presence without needing it to mean anything beyond itself. This is embodiment philosophy, the radical notion that existence is confirmed not by thought or memory or impact, but by the simple fact of being a body. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." But the body says, "I am, therefore I am." No thinking required, no therefore required, just the am, raw and immediate. You are here because your lungs are working, because your heart is pumping, because your neurons are firing and your muscles are tensing and releasing. This is not poetic. This is not inspiring. This is just true. And sometimes truth is enough. Sometimes truth is the only thing that is enough. The comfortable dark here is this: you do not have to matter. You do not have to be remembered. You do not have to leave a mark or make an impact or be significant. You just have to breathe, and you are already doing that without trying, without earning it, without deserving it or justifying it. The body gives you existence for free, not the kind of existence that history records, not the kind that people tell stories about, but the kind that is real, the kind that happens, the kind that is. Can you feel forgotten when your breath confirms you are here? The answer is yes. You can feel forgotten. You can feel erased and invisible and insignificant. But while you are feeling all of that, you are still breathing, still here, still occurring in space and time. The feeling of being forgotten and the fact of being present exist simultaneously. The emotion does not erase the reality. This is the return to the body, not as escape, not as solution, but as ground, as bedrock, as the place you can stand when everything else feels like quicksand. Your body is the one thing that cannot be taken from you by forgetting. It is yours. Temporary, yes. Fragile, yes. Mortal, yes. But yours, and here, and real. Feel your breath. Feel the weight of your bones. Feel the texture of your own skin under your fingertips. This is not metaphor. This is fact. You are here, not because anyone remembers you, not because you matter, but because you are a body, and bodies are here until they are not. And for now, you are not. You are here, breathing, weighted, present. Is this enough? The body doesn't answer, doesn't care if it's enough, just breathes, just is, indifferent to your need for it to be sufficient. The benediction. The benediction, the final permission, the one you've been waiting for without knowing you were waiting, without knowing there was something to wait for. What remains when we stop needing to remain? Let's find out together. Let's walk to the edge of that question and step off. Not into darkness, into release. There is a difference. The fatigue, the weight of carrying yourself forward through time, the exhausting performance of mattering, of making your mark, of ensuring that when you're gone, something stays, a name, a legacy, an echo in someone else's mouth. But why? Why does it matter that it matters? Because we're terrified of the alternative, the complete erasure, the universe going on without us as though we never punctured its surface at all. But here's the thing they don't tell you, the thing that sits underneath all the striving and the building and the desperate grasping at permanence. It's already happening. Right now, you are already being forgotten by most people who have ever known you. Think about it. Drill down. How many people from your childhood think of you weekly, monthly? How many remember the exact shape of your face, the specific cadence of your voice? How many colleagues from jobs you've left? How many friends who drifted? How many lovers whose skin you knew intimately, who wouldn't recognize you now on the street? The forgetting is not waiting for you in some distant future. The forgetting is the texture of existence itself, and you're still here, still breathing, still viable, still capable of this moment. So what were you actually afraid of? Not the forgetting is already done. You were afraid that the forgetting meant you didn't matter, that if people don't hold you in their minds like a precious object, then you were never real to begin with. But why does mattering require remembering? Why does significance need duration? A wave breaks on the shore. It matters to the sand in that instant. It reshapes the beach. Then it's gone, reabsorbed into the ocean. No wave-shaped hole remains in the water. No memorial. Does that wave weep for its lost identity? Does it rage against the ocean for not holding its specific form forever? Or does it simply return? Here is what mysticism understands that philosophy only glimpses, that the self you're trying to preserve, the one you want people to remember, it's already a fiction, a temporary coalition of atoms and electricity and story, a pattern that emerged for a breath and will dissolve back into the pattern-making substrate of everything. You are not a thing that will end. You are an ending that temporarily appears as a thing. There is a profound relief in this. Let yourself feel it, the exhaustion of self-maintenance. the constant curation of your own mythology, the editing of your past into something coherent, the projection of your future into something meaningful, the defense of your present against everyone who sees you differently than you see yourself. What if you could just stop? Not stop existing, stop insisting, stop needing your existence to mean something beyond its own immediate isness. The mystics knew this. Every tradition, every practice that takes you deep enough. There's a moment when the meditator realizes they've been looking for the looker, when the seeker understands that what they seek is the seeking itself, when the question, "Who am I?" runs so many loops it collapses into laughter, because there is no who, there's just the asking, the being aware of, the experiencing through, a localized intensification of consciousness that calls itself a name for convenience and then forgets the name was just a tool, not the truth. You want to know what remains when we stop needing to remain? Everything. Absolutely everything. Just not as you. Not as this defended, narrated, remembered thing, but as the awareness that's been watching this whole time. The part of you that's been listening to these words. That part doesn't have a shape, doesn't have a story, doesn't need a legacy. It's the space in which all shapes and stories and legacies appear and disappear, and it's not yours. You're its, temporarily, like the ocean is temporarily a wave. This is the benediction, the good word, the blessing you didn't know you needed permission to receive. You're allowed to stop trying to be eternal. You're allowed to be as temporary as a breath, as forgotten as last Tuesday, as unremarkable as the trillion organisms that lived and died to make the soil under your feet. And in that allowance, in that release, there is a kind of immortality. Not the immortality of being remembered, the immortality of being what everything is, temporarily concentrated into the experience of being you. But always, always, just a temporary mask on the permanent face of existence itself. The fatigue you feel, that ancient exhaustion, it's not depression, it's not failure, it's wisdom trying to break through the story. Your body already knows it's temporary. Your cells replace themselves constantly. You are not the same physical object you were 7 years ago. Not one atom the same. Your body has been practicing disappearance and reappearance your entire life. And you call that continuity. You call that being you. But it's not. It's a process that learned to call itself a name. So let's drill down one more time. Why do you need to be remembered? Because you need to have mattered. Why do you need to have mattered? Because you need to have been real. Why do you need to have been real? Because you're afraid you weren't. But here, now, this is real, not because it will last, because it's happening. The sound of these words, the breath in your lungs, the weight of your body, the specific quality of light wherever you are, the thought arising right now in response to this. That's real, not permanent. Real. There's a difference. Permanence is a story we tell about reality. Reality is what's left when the story stops, and what's left is astonishing, immediate, alive, utterly indifferent to being remembered because it's too busy being. This is what remains when we stop needing to remain. The remaining itself. The pure fact of presence, not your presence. Presence presenting as you, for now. And when it stops presenting as you, when the pattern dissolves and the atoms redistribute and the story ends and the forgetting completes itself, presence will still be here, being something else, someone else, everything else. You were never separate from it. You were just a way it looked at itself for a while. a perspective it took, a question it asked in the shape of your specific life. And now, maybe, if you're ready, you can stop needing to be the answer. You can just be the asking, the living question, the temporary wonder, the brief flowering of consciousness that knows itself and then releases that knowing back into the unknown. This is the benediction. You are blessed in your forgetting, sacred in your impermanence, holy in your absolute ordinariness. You don't need to leave a mark. You are the surface on which all marks appear. You don't need to be remembered. You are the remembering itself, temporarily convinced it's something that could be forgotten. But it can't, because it's not a thing. It's the isness of things. And you, right now, are that, being itself, playing at being you. And when the play is over, when the curtain falls and the audience forgets and the theater empties, the capacity for play remains, infinite, eternal, ready to be something else, someone else, everywhere, always. This is what you are, not the character, the stage, not the wave, the ocean, not the memory, the remembering. And you are allowed, finally, completely, to let that be enough, to stop fighting for permanence and rest in the perfection of your own impermanence. Released, perhaps, or just exhausted enough to stop asking. The benediction doesn't complete anything. You're still here, still tired, still wondering if any of this meant anything.